Hey, thanks for joining us today. My name's Adam with Firegang Dental Marketing, and I've got Susan here with BCFO. Thanks for joining us, Susan. Susan actually does some work with us. We contract with BCFO and with Susan to help us out a lot, and she's done amazing stuff. So we're happy to have her here talking about HR and kind of what she does. So Susan, can you kind of tell us a little bit about your background, who you are, what you do, a little bit maybe more about what BCFO is?
Sure, be glad to. So VCFO, which stands for Virtual CFO, is really a accounting and financial consultancy. We provide fractional CFO support or controller support to businesses who either don't have one yet, they're emerging companies, or that they have a CFO and a full finance and accounting staff, but they need more support on a fractional basis, so either part-time or as needed, or even during an interim period when they're looking for a CFO. We also have an HR piece of that practice. A lot of our clients just really need that extra HR support, or need either a strategic view on something, or they need a couple of extra hands, and we provide fractional HR support as well. I have been in human resources for 30 years. Most recently, I was a member of the original executive team as the VP of HR for a company that went from zero to almost $1 billion in revenue over a 15-year period. And so I am very, very adept at emerging companies, small practice, mostly small to medium-sized practices and businesses. And so I know a lot about levering your human capital, how to leverage the human capital that you have to make that to make your workforce just really flow.
Awesome. Yeah, we've seen, like, we didn't know what we didn't know on HR stuff, and obviously it's been a huge help realizing how to hire and fire and what types of paperwork needs to be in place and what kind of processes need to happen and so on. So it's been really helpful, and we'll talk about some of that. I know that one of the issues that a lot of practices get into as they grow is how to hire the right people, or as they're adding additional locations, or most of the locations seem to have more HR-related issues, or even starting to hire executives and so on. What would you say are some good hiring frameworks that dentists could follow, to be sure that they're hiring the right people? And are there specific steps to take, or like a specific process you would recommend that they follow?
Right, exactly. It's so interesting from a consumer's perspective, being an HR professional, but I'm also a consumer of dental services. I know what it feels like when you walk into a dental practice and you really can identify that these people have the art of hiring down pat. It's obvious when you walk into that kind of a hiring practice. Typically, those hiring practices are individuals who take hiring very seriously. They see it as a very integral part of their business, just as it is important to make sure that you have the right financial structure in place. So I would say that, first and foremost, the owner of a practice, particularly an owner who's looking at expanding their business and having multiple locations, there really does need to be a structure around how we hire great people. There really needs to be some thought that's put into that. And somebody in the organization, if it's not the founder and owner of the practice, somebody in the organization needs to be assigned to the task of really understanding how to brand your dental practice from an employment branding standpoint. How do we look to the marketplace? Why do people want to work here? To really understand what I call the EVP, or the employer value proposition. It's just like a value proposition in any product or service. What is it that why do people want to work here? And if you don't have a good story to tell potential employees, they're not going to come. So somebody in the practice, particularly if you're expanding, needs to take that on, the employment branding. What do people say about us on social media as an employer? What do places, referrals say? Do we get a lot of referrals from current employees? But first and foremost, I think it's important for a hiring manager or the hiring owner to say, what is the profile of the employee that I am looking to hire? What are those competencies that somebody needs to have to work for this practice? So as I was thinking about speaking with you today, Adam, I was thinking about, if I was the hiring manager for a dental practice, what would be the things that I'm looking for? And specifically, obviously, the first is technical competence. That's a very important competency. The second would be definitely, that ability to be patient sensitive, to be not only have good empathy, have good sensitivities around people who maybe are very anxious, understanding how to lower that anxiety, how to have a demeanor that is basically a fabulous bedside manner. So that's the second competency, the first being technical competency, the second being the actual patient bedside, so to speak, manner. The third would be systems competency. A lot of practices that are starting to grow are really getting into some heavy duty systems around their information, around their data, the health information laws and legislation around maintaining that health information. So that's very important. Also is, like any employer, a fourth competency would be ethics, strong work ethics. How strong is their work ethic? How dependable are they? And the last would be, I think, an attention to detail. Somebody who dots the I's and crosses the T's when it comes to practicing their skill and enveloping that skill with a sensitivity to people. So those are 5 competencies. I think that what a practice owner should do is say, if those are the 5 competencies, what are the interviewing questions that I need to ask that are going to get at telling me whether or not those people have those skills? And of course, we always talk about behavioral interviewing, which is not asking open-ended, not asking yes/no questions, but asking open-ended questions. For example, tell me about a time when you had a really anxious patient and they could hardly open their mouth. What did you do to make that person feel more comfortable? That's an example of a behavioral interview question that will get at whether or not they have empathy, whether or not that they are sensitive to the feelings of patients about to receive dental work. So that's probably a process that I would highly recommend, which is start with what are the competencies required for this job, and then develop interview questions to get at those competencies. Second, I know that very strong dental practices that I'm aware of, they actually use a working interview, where after somebody makes it to the final category of interviews, they actually bring them on site for the day before they're hired. And they actually put them in the scrubs in their uniforms, and they have them really assisting the dental assistant all day long and interacting with the patient, so that the dental assistant and the dentist can see how they interact with the patients. I mean, nothing like a real life simulation. I do have to say here, Adam, that the correlation coefficient of an interview to on-the-job success is very, very low, meaning that an interview statistically really doesn't guarantee you, no matter how good you are at interviewing, doesn't guarantee that you're going to get the best hire for the job. So any sort of simulation, whether it be a role play, whether it be a live simulation, as I just described, that's very, very beneficial, because it really pumps up that correlation between whether or not that person can be successful in that practice.
Interesting. That's like all really good stuff. So what are people looking for then when they're choosing a dental practice to work for? Like what makes a practice attractive to potential hires?
Right. Definitely any sort of job that is client facing, such as a dental practice, where they're, particularly nowadays, dental practices are extending hours into the evenings, they're extending hours onto the weekends. Obviously, one thing that is important to people is, while they would love to work Monday through Friday, that they know that they can't. Some people, particularly as they're new, need to take those weekend shifts. The best thing that a dentist can do is try and give as much consistency in scheduling as possible. And if they do have to change schedules, that they give employees plenty of notice that the schedules need to change. Of course, like any employer, great benefits, a good benefits program that would include healthcare, dental, vision, potentially short-term disability, long-term disability, life insurance. Those things are important, PTO, vacation time. And then last but not least, outstanding management. Somebody who has management that is approachable, somebody who has a workplace culture that is open to dialogue, open to surveys, meaning that you're collecting data on the practice and you really want people's feedback, particularly from millennials nowadays. Millennials are all over being a part of the culture and being able to express their opinion on how that organization is run. And if they don't have the platform to express that, they feel very stunted in their ability to be a part of and engaged with that organization.
Interesting. Okay. So what are some key mistakes you see being made by companies when it comes to hiring and recruiting?
Yes. First of all, it's two things that I've already mentioned. The one is not paying attention to what the market is saying about you in regards to what kind of an employer you are. You need to be showing a very good side of yourself from a branding standpoint. Take a look at what's being said on Glassdoor. Take a look at what's being said on LinkedIn. Definitely when a practice owner does not take hiring seriously, does not see it as a competency that they should have, that they're good at, then they really miss it. There is a war for talent going on in the US. It's been going on for the last several years, and there is no winning the war at talent. It is a matter merely of competing for the war for talent. It is just as you, Adam, help your practice, your practice customers in terms of marketing their services. An equal amount of effort and an equal amount of brain power needs to put into marketing and branding for the purpose of bringing in great employees.
Yeah, interesting. So what would you say the importance of of a company culture in retaining talent is?
Huge, 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 huge. As I spoke earlier about millennials, and it's not just millennials. I mean, we've got 4 or 5 generations in the workplace right now. And if millennials are doing anything, they're driving employers to really be paying attention to culture. And by the year 2025, by the way, 73% of the workforce are going to be millennial employees. So if we're not understanding what they want from a culture, today, we're not going to be good at it as the years go by. So yes, culture is critical, and it's really starts with knowing what your employees want from their employer. What do they want from you? And the best way of going about doing that is to do an employee opinion survey once a year. More than once a year, I think, is overkill in my opinion, but at least once a year to be able to collect data, look at the results, share those results with the employees. Do not keep those results close to chest. Share the results with the employees and realistically tell employees what you can and what you cannot do or what you strive to do better. Again, it is an employee's market out there, and it really starts with understanding what your workforce wants and helping them to understand what you can and what you can't deliver.
Awesome. So is there anything else, any other bit of advice that you would recommend to dental practices looking to either hire or scale up or deal with, one thing I get a lot of is dental practices struggle finding good associates, keeping them. Same with hygienists, finding them, keeping them. Some of the clients we're working with now are, struggling to find executives and,
Yep.
as they scale larger. But anything else that you would want to point out?
Yeah, I would say that a couple of things. First of all, as I mentioned, I think that there are a lot of folks out there who would like to get a start in HR. In a dental practice, it could be that HR is not a full-time job, and that is absolutely fine. But there are a lot of people out there wanting to learn HR, and maybe you've got an office manager, or maybe you've got an administrative assistant or an executive assistant, or a dental assistant even, who really wants to have a more varied position. Tell them that they're responsible for assisting you with culture. Tell them that they're responsible for helping you to make this a great place to work. And I can guarantee you will get tenfold out of that individual who's going to be engaged in helping you be creative around that. Secondly, I would highly recommend that you always keep your compensation at market. I think that it's important to stay either at market or slightly lead the market in compensation, particularly because the war in talent is what it is. If you're located in a city where unemployment is low, the worst thing you could do is have compensation rates that are under market. And it's expensive to bring them up if you get too far behind. Um, Again, I guess the third thing would be understand that as a practice owner, you can't do it all. You've got to engage other people in this, in being a champion for a great culture. But it doesn't mean you have to do it all yourself. Engage other people, maybe set up a committee, maybe set up I used to have a committee called the Culture Club. And these were a group of a variety of employees who would come together once a month and think about things to make the office a fun place to work. And we called it the Culture Club. So anything you can do to be creative, but get help. Don't think you can do it all. And, if you're shy about these things, don't be, because employees really are demanding more today from their leaders in this area than they have in the past.
Interesting. Yeah, I know it's, HR is kind of it's like a deep rabbit hole. It's very complex, in getting into it all. And I found that, unless you get the right help, it can be very expensive. And it's a lot cheaper to hire the right people, or at least hire the right support to begin with, and make the right decisions and find the right people, and make sure that when you bring them on, you're setting the right expectations and so on, so that you're not trying to deal with somebody after the fact. I mean, that's what we've seen.
Really good point. Really good point. I think that is a big mistake that business owners make. I think they think that, oh, well, I don't need to worry about HR until I'm, at 20 employees or 25 or 50 employees. And that's a mistake. And that's VCFO basically created this business model just for that purpose. Because if you have 5 employees, if you have 10 employees, it is not too early to make sure that you have good HR structure in place, and tap that expertise just as you need it.
Yeah, we waited until we were well over 20, and I wish we would have done it sooner. There's just a lot that we didn't know. So I would say, I would recommend it that if anyone wants help in any of these things, they should potentially reach out to you. How can they get a hold of you?
Sure. VCFO is in fact based out of several offices nationwide. And we have an office in Austin, Texas, an office in Dallas, Houston, Seattle, Denver. And but here in Austin, I can be reached at area code 512-874-7450. And just call that number and ask for Suzin Sciabarasi. That's SCIAB as in boy, ARASI. It's an Italian last name. It's a little tough, but it's Suzin Sciabarasi. Thanks for asking, Adam.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time today. I hope that everyone got something out of this. Again, I highly recommend that you reach out to an expert on a lot of this stuff, because you won't know what you won't know. And, in a lot of cases, you can potentially protect yourself from adverse outcomes as well. So it's just really, really helpful.
Thank you. Take care.